All right. It is into August, early September up here in the Pacific Northwest. And you know what that means? That means dahlia flowers. Now, you know what's funny is I don't really consider myself a flower photographer or a macro or a close up photographer. I'm more of a landscape and a wildlife photographer. But we have so many cool dahlia farms here up in the Pacific Northwest. And this flower, the dahlia flower, comes in so many varieties, so many colors, so many shapes that I just love spending time out in the dahlia fields. And it's just one of those things every year I come out and spend some time with my macro lenses and do some close up work of the flowers. And it really is it's a wonderful time. It's a contemplative time. It's a time to really work on some skills of doing close-up photography, because I don't do it enough that it's second nature. So in this case, it allows me to sort of refocus and work on some technical skills as well as creative skills, because these flowers just beg you to shoot them in many, many different ways. And today is a day that I chose to come out. We've had really unseasonably warm weather here. We've had 80, 90, 100-degree days, lots of clear skies. And my first tip for shooting dahlias is try to find an overcast day if you can. Having flat, even lighting across the flowers makes the composition that much better. And in bright sunlight, there's so many shadows that are created as a result of these of the direct light, that I really look for cloudy days. And this is one of the only cloudy days we've had in the last couple of weeks. And so I made an effort to get out here during this time and get some great lighting conditions. And for you guys that do close-up photography, or if you're wanting to get into close-up photography, the one thing that I would recommend that you bring as well with you, one of the things that I usually have is a diffuser. Now, I found a nice 12-inch diffuser that folds up and fits in my pocket, which works wonderfully. And I use this sort of over the top of flowers to help diffuse some of the light. If it is sunny outside and we have some direct light on the flowers, I'll use this, hold it up over the flower, and try to diffuse some of that light and lessen some of the shadows that are happening on the flowers. Of course, I've come out here with my macro lens. Today I'm shooting a Fujifilm GFX 50S with the 120 millimeter macro lens, and this is a great combination that has served me extremely well. I love the medium format files, and of course the Fujifilm color science for me is fantastic. I love it. I've been a Fujifilm shooter for years, and really happy sticking with this brand, and love what they do with the color, and I love the glass. The thing that's really cool about these flowers, as I said, they come in so many different shapes, so many different colors. But look at the petal structure on this. Look at the graduation of colors as it moves from yellow to pink to pale yellow on the outer edges. There's so much you can do in a close-up environment with a flower like this. And then along with that, you have the green foliage behind it. If you choose to include any of that, it makes for a really, really nice contrast. Now here I've got my first composition sorted up. And with dahlia flowers, you can shoot both horizontally and vertically. I tend to like a little bit more of the vertical orientation, because oftentimes I get flow of the petals and motion of the petals going up and down through the frame, so I like it. One of the keys of picking good subjects and good flowers, I'm fortunate today that the flowers are in fantastic condition, and they just got done watering. They use a sprinkler system to water the flowers, and I look for flowers that have water drops on them. I don't bring a spray bottle. I don't do my own watering. But what I tend to do is look for these flowers that have water drops, because those add some wonderful bits of visual interest to flowers. So let's see how this first shot turns out. The other thing with shooting close-up stuff, as you may know, is you don't need to include the whole subject. And that's true with flowers as well. I often will not include the entire flower. I'll just pick a portion of it, the petals or the pistil, the area that I find the most interesting, and I'll get really close and just have part of the flower in. You know, and just psychologically, the reason we don't need the full subject is that once you see a part of a flower, your brain fills in the rest. You don't need to show the whole thing for somebody to know that this is a photograph of a flower. So cutting off part of the subject is okay, and it's often encouraged from an artistic point of view. One question I do get asked a lot when out here photographing flowers is, should I use a circular polarizer? And, you know, CPLs are great for bringing out color in certain things, but I tend to not use a CPL when I'm doing work on the dahlia flowers, even after they've just watered and there's a chance of reflection. The reason being is that, though, as I said earlier, the water drops. I love having the water drops. And the contrast of the water and the glare of the water drops helps them stand out from the flower. And a CPL will help cut down that contrast and that glare, thereby making the drops a little bit less noticeable. So I do all I can to sort of keep those water drops visible in the frame. Now, if you know your color science, you know that red is a really strong color, really powerful color, and it's sometimes really fun to shoot. But let me tell you, when shooting flowers, these red flowers, they don't resolve themselves into great photographs. So I tend to stay away from shooting these red flowers. I love looking at them, but I just don't photograph them because it all tends to munge together into the photograph. And I don't get the separation of the petals that I do in some of the other colors. So to do this, I'm out in a really local farm that raises dahlias commercially. And most flower farms have what they call a test garden, where they're testing out different varieties of flowers, and they have specimens of each of the varieties that they're offering that year. Typically, these test gardens are really well manicured, well tended, because they're the best of the best examples of these particular varieties. So I oftentimes head directly into the test garden to find some of the best examples of each flowers. That way it saves you a lot of walking through the fields, and it's just almost an easier time about it. You know, sometimes the specimens are limited, even though they're great quality. You might not get the exact right flower or facing the right direction, so then I'll walk out into the fields and find different examples of a particular flower. When you're shooting a flower like this, look at the petals. Look at how much distance is between the tip of the petal and the pistil. This is a fairly large flower, and you can see from the size of my hand, right? It's a fairly large size flower, and so there's a big distance here, and so you really have to pay attention to your depth of field when you're doing stuff like this. And I'm shooting at f/29 on my full frame, or on my medium format, sorry. And that's just barely enough. Oftentimes, if I don't have a lot of wind, I will do a focus stack because I'm working so close and there's such a distance to travel, even though it's only 3 or 4 inches. But when you're working in close-up environments, 3 to 4 inches can be a lot of space. So really watch your depth of field. And remember, the closer you are to your subject, the shallower your depth of field. I don't know if you can see this in the back of my camera, but one of the big things to really pay attention to is what direction the flower is pointed. To shoot your shot however you want it, whether you want it straight on or slightly at an angle, you really have to find the right specimen pointed in the right direction to execute the photograph that you want. And in this case, I'm shooting slightly off center. So I'm shooting at an angle, and the flower is pointing up this direction, away kind of to the upper right. in my frame. And that gives it a little bit of a direction, a little bit of a flow, and it works quite well. Now, when it comes to camera orientation, whether you're shooting in landscape or portrait mode, it really depends on the flower. It depends on the subject and depends on how you want to capture the flower, what your story is. Some of the flowers with the really long, curvy petals, I love to shoot in portrait mode to get that flow from top to bottom of the petals. Other flowers, they just work better in a horizontal mode. Other flowers, I will crop into a 1x1 square. There are some flowers that work both horizontally and vertically. Like here's a variety right here that works in both ways. The other big tip I'll give you out here when shooting flowers is really do edge patrol. And what you want is, obviously you don't want a lot of stuff poking in the edges of your frame, but with dealing with so many different flower petals, what you want is to have each petal fully resolved in the frame, or if you're going to cut them off, be very intentional. And I'll tend to cut them off equidistant on each side, so I will cut off top, bottom, left and right, or I'll cut off left and right, or cut off top and bottom. But either way, make a conscious choice. If you're going to cut something off, be intentional about it. Otherwise, get the whole petal in the frame and let it fully resolve and have enough space. And I know when shooting flowers, oftentimes we like to have our background soft, blown out of focus. And so if you do have background behind the flowers, really play around with your depth of field, play around with your aperture, see what you like, see what works and what doesn't. But like I said earlier, if you're shooting at such an angle where you're shooting the long bit of the petal, and it's near to far, really you have to pay attention to your depth of field, and you might not be able to get your background as blown out as you might like. So sometimes you can pick flatter faced flowers and shoot them at such an angle where most of the flower is on the same plane of focus. That way you can use a shallower depth of field, a smaller aperture, or a larger aperture, smaller number, to get a shallower depth of field and blow it out. So really pick your flowers to shoot the right shots. So you can see this flower here is relatively flat, relatively on the same plane of focus. And if I'm shooting straight down like this, I get most of the flower on the same plane of focus. If I was shooting at an angle like this, I couldn't use the shallow depth of field that I'm doing shooting straight on. So pick your flower and pick your position to maximize your depth of field and what you want to do creatively in terms of blowing out the background. Well, the wind has picked up, the sun's starting to bust through the clouds, and the crowds have shown up. So it's time for me to say goodbye from the dahlia fields. But I tell you, before I leave, one of the things I do too is they sell bunches of flowers. So I end up buying a bunch, taking it home, partly for my wife, but partly for, I can sit at my dining room table and do some other macro type shots that I want to do in the comfort of my own home. So I usually buy some cut flowers as well, have them around the house, and if I feel like doing more macro or close-up work, I can do it with these wonderful, wonderful specimens. All right, folks, thanks for watching. Hope you had a great time watching this, and get out there and shoot, and I'll see you later. Bye-bye.